Hello and welcome back. So it's about time I update with what I've been planning with these things. So let me just recap on what I've been planning so far. So first of all, everything started off with this little thing, this 80 games. Is it 80 games? I think it was 80 games. This Mega Drive arcade ultimate portable handheld thing, and I thought, wouldn't it be good if we could get a Raspberry Pi in this? Turns out that's actually going to be rather difficult. So I've mentioned this in previous videos, but there really is not a hell of a lot of space in here. Despite what it might look like, there's a lot of room is needed for all the components in here. So if I was to try and reverse engineer this, I've got to have 6 micro switches over here, micro switch here, micro switch here. I've got to have potentially 4 micro switches here, or just one 4-way micro switch. I need to retain this power on off switch. I'm going to need headphones. Well, I don't need headphones. I would like to have the capability to have headphones. But there is a speaker here, obviously. We've got a bunch of connectors on the top, which I may or may not need, but obviously we've got a charging jack here as well. Basically, there is a hell of a lot to fit in here, and yeah, I haven't given up on the idea of this entirely. This is just going to be a hell of a lot of work. So what I thought next was, why don't we try and do something like this, the Wii U gamepad. So obviously for those who haven't seen it, it's the wireless controller for the game for the Wii U. I would switch it on and fire it up, but Nintendo will slap a nice big copyright claim on my video if I do that, so I won't. Hello, you can see me. So I thought about making something like this. So what I did, I went off and started designing some PCBs to go around the edge here. So at the time I thought, screw it, I don't want the analog sticks, I just want the D-pads. So I've designed a board to go across the bottom here. We've got 5 buttons on the bottom. We've got a D-pad board, we've got these face buttons, etc, etc. So part of that, I went off to get this thing kind of thing up and running. I went off to buy this screen. This is a 5-inch LCD, so it's made by a company called Waveshare. Let's spin it around onto the back here. So it's made by a company called Waveshare. That's their crappy looking logo there. As you can see, it's 800 by 480. It does use a USB touchscreen, so we've got the 2 micro USB connectors here. We've got one for power only and one for touch, and I've really been banging my head against the wall with this goddamn thing because I cannot for the life of me get the touch to work. I refuse to download. The company only actually provide binary images, and I refuse to download and use them because I don't know what's on them. I don't know what the hell they've done to it. They don't provide their source files, so you can't verify it. And it's fair to say that Chinese companies don't always have a massive amount of respect for copyright, but they do break the GPL licenses in this case because they don't provide the source for the stuff they've modified, blah blah blah. I'm just not willing to risk it, and all the third-party drivers I've found for this thing, I just cannot get them to work. But it's a nice screen. It's a really nice screen, to be fair, and this was going to be the basis for this. As you can see, it looks like the height is almost right, but when you actually fire this up and measure this, you would see that, and I have actually done measurements of this, so you can see that the visible area doesn't necessarily correspond to the entire size of the frame here, and if we see the width, it's a little bit narrow. But in any case, I was going to be designing and making something completely custom for that. So what I've done recently, however, I've had a couple of ideas. So part of the challenge that you've got with this thing is getting the video input into these and the power input. So part of the challenge I've had with that is trying to figure out how I'm going to do that. So I found all sorts of thin, flat cables and whatnot. But what I also got to thinking was that I could just design a board which has got a male micro USB and a male HDMI socket on there. So if you imagine, we've got another PCB which just plugs straight into these connectors on the side, which I've designed. So part of the problem with that, obviously, is that hopefully we can actually see this on this camera. But is it going to focus for me? Are we going to get focus? Probably not. Can we zoom in? I know what the zoom is like here. not very good. But in any case, you can see that the pitch on these pins is ridiculously tiny. I mean, I've barely got room to get the nib of this spudger down between the pins, so it's gonna be awkward doing that. But if I build myself a home reflow oven, that's going to be a hell of a lot easier. So what I can do, I actually had to go. Let me grab a thing. I should have got this beforehand. Ugh, what a horrible noise. Ugh, gross. Sorry about that. I actually had a go at doing some surface mount soldering here. So this is a breakout board for a 0.5mm flat flex connector. So I can't see it very well on the lens here. Hopefully you're going to be able to pick it up on the camera. Basically, I've done an absolutely shit job. But if I get a reflow oven going, I can just I can get a solder mask, a stencil for solder paste. Wipe the solder through that. Place the connector on here, stick it in my reflow oven, and job's done. So having a reflow oven, which is part of the workbench that I want to get together, having that available gives me a hell of a lot of options. So what I think I'm going to be doing now with this portable arcade MAME project thing is I'm actually going to branch this off into several different projects here. So first of all, I'm going to resurrect this. So I had a look, and to make something which has roughly the equivalent size PCB that this thing does, it's going to be quite expensive. It's going to be about 40 quid to get that PCB made up, but I think it's probably going to be worth it. So what I'm going to do as a first prototype for this, and this is probably going to be a way off, is just build the bare PCB with a screen, 6 through-hole buttons, a couple of buttons up here, D-pad, shining light back into the camera, with an external connector for the battery, maybe an external connector, maybe with an external connector for charging the thing. So that's one. So what I'm going to do for the screen on this, and again, I should have got this out beforehand. Where have I put it? In here. So this is the Adafruit Pi TFT 2.8 inch module. This is the GPIO based SPI screen. So what they've actually done here, I'm going to regret doing this, but I'm going to do it anyway. Let me disconnect this thing here so I can show you exactly what I'm talking about. These plastic spudgers, by the way, very, very handy. So what they've actually done here is used, if I can separate this, I've already really weakened the tape. Come on. Try not to break anything. There we go. So all they've done here is this screen. This is the actual screen itself. Here's our wonderful connector, our real bastard of a connector there. They've just mounted this screen with literally a bit of double-sided sticky tape onto this carrier board, and obviously they've got this big slot cutout, this big internal cutout here for the cable to come around the back here. So I've had a look at the schematics for this, and most of this passive stuff is either for power regulation or it's for the touchscreen controller, and I'm not necessarily interested in the touchscreen controller on something this size. So what I can potentially do is have a board, design a board with a similar kind of mounting arrangement to this. So we've got a nice big flat wide area here for mounting the screen directly to, cut out slot here so that the cable can go right back through here to a flat flex connector. And obviously if I'm going to have a reflow oven, I can reflow these, I'm going to call these bastard pins. Yeah, I can reflow these horrible bastard pins instead of having to try and solder it by hand, which will be bloody brilliant. So that's one thing I think I'm going to do. I'm just going to struggle to reattach this screen. I'm not going to bother reconnecting the flat flex because that's such a bitch to do. But let me just get the cable back through. That went like that. You stuck down there like that. Yeah, like I said, I'm not going to bother reattaching that cable because it's an absolute twat. So let's get rid of that for a moment. Get in there, get in there. This room gets very messy. I have to put things away as I go because, well, I would turn the camera around behind me, but it's horrific in here. I have to put things away as I go. Okay. So that's one of the things that I'm going to build, and that one's going to be quite expensive, I think. So that still leaves the question of what do I do with this big custom thing using this screen. So I started having a look at what it's actually going to cost to build a case that is similar to the Wii U gamepad, of a similar size and what have you. And I even went up and did some measurements and did some sketches and what have you on this. Basically, to have something like this made is going to cost an utter bloody fortune. So what I thought was, screw it, let's get one of these and mod it. So what I've done, I've bought a shell for the Wii U gamepad. So that what that is basically, I've got the two plastic sides here. It doesn't have a screen. It doesn't have any of the other internal components and what have you, but what it does have is all the face buttons and what have you. So it's basically an empty shell, but with all of this stuff intact. So what the plan then is for this bigger custom version is I am going to utilize all of the available controls, which means that I'm going to need a TNC interface, because otherwise I'm not going to get nice analog stick action. I'm going to need a custom TNC thing. I'm going to need a screen which is going to fit in here, but I'll get to that in a moment. And I'll pull up some images of this because I don't actually have it yet, and it's really frustrating. I've ordered it on March 1st and I still haven't actually had the shell through yet. But to be fair, it's got to get from, where was it, Sacramento in California down to South Wales. So to be fair, it's not doing too bad. But yeah, I'll need all the interfacing. Oh yeah, what was I saying? Sorry. I'll pull up a screenshot of this, but all of the buttons here come out to flat flex cables, which is going to be a pain in the arse. Hopefully this is where the, what's that called? The reflow oven is going to come in handy. The big thing with this, however, is the screen, because this is a 6.2 inch screen, and that is a stupid awkward size. Probably designed as a stupid awkward size so that it makes it harder for you to do a custom repair on it, but never mind. So what I've done though, I'm going to have to modify this thing when I get it, because there is no screens. There is no screen that will fit in that. As I mentioned earlier, this kinda sorta looks like it might, but it won't. So if I try to use this 5-inch screen, I would have to make some kind of custom bezel to go around it and mount inside there, and that sounds like that's just going to be a pain. So instead of trying to use the 5-inch screen, I've gone and ordered a 7-inch screen. This is absolutely lovely. It's by the same company called Waveshare, and I'll put the link directly into the manufacturer's website for both of these screens. But this one is 7-inch. It's capacitive multi-touch, as you can probably see all these things around the side here. Let's flip it over. More importantly, some of the other specs that we've got here is that it's 1024 by 600, so it's much higher resolution. As I said, it's capacitive multi-touch. It uses a USB interface, but this revision recognizes or identifies itself when you plug it in as a standard USB HID class device. So that means that as long as you've got the appropriate drivers installed for your operating system will recognize the touchscreen natively, which means that unlike this resistive touch with its custom weird firmware, you don't have any of that nonsense. What's down in there? I can see controller boards down there. Sorry, you don't have any of that weirdness, any of that weird custom driver nonsense, any of that weird, any of that awkward bloody firmware image stuff, none of that, because you just plug it in. Now I've tested this already on a Raspberry Pi 3. It works with a Raspberry Pi Zero as well. I've tested it using RetroPie on a Raspberry Pi 3, and it works brilliantly. It's an IPS screen, so the quality of it is absolutely lovely. The touchscreen works no problem in Raspbian, but it doesn't quite seem to work properly in RetroPie. Maybe I'll be able to show you in another video, but it doesn't quite work properly. But I have a feeling that that is a solvable problem. It at least recognizes the fact that it's a HID touchscreen, and it recognizes the fact that it can take input from it. So it's progress at least. Now, one thing I did find when I was measuring up the other day, obviously this is massively bigger than the available space in the Wii U. So again, like with the 5-inch one, the dimensions of the black part here aren't necessarily all visible screen area, and I have measured the visible screen area, but what I'm gonna need to do is modify the bejesus out of this thing when I get it through. I don't want to take this one apart and actually have a look inside this one, because this is mine. This isn't that old. It's only about 3 or 4 months old, and it's still under warranty, so I don't want to go ripping things apart in case I ever have to have it replaced or repaired. But yeah, I'm definitely going to have to modify the internals of this, but what I'm hoping, we can see, hopefully look at the profile of the device, it's a fairly chunky beast. There's a lot going on inside here, but it's a fairly chunky beast. So hopefully there's going to be enough room to get everything in here. Hello, you can see me again. Hi. Okay, so just to recap then, the larger custom version of this handheld portable thing is still on. That's still going to happen. That's still going to be a possibility. But instead of that, I'm going to be using the Wii U gamepad shell. Hopefully, once I get the shell through, I'll record another video regarding it. But I'm also going to start work on something which is similar to this. And to start with, it's just going to be a bare PCB. But yeah, the aim obviously is to try. I want to try and get something which will actually fit inside here. That's going to take a while, so at least I can produce a prototype to start with where it looks like this, but just basically a bare PCB. So this one I think is going to be a while, because the PCB costs are going to be quite expensive for that. For the large version, I haven't actually decided which version of the Raspberry Pi I'm going to use yet. Well, in fact, for both of these I haven't decided which version of the Pi I'm going to use. The obvious suggestion would be the obvious suggestion would be the Raspberry Pi Zero, but I'm not so sure of that, because it's awkward. It's awkward to use that. How do you mount that inside a case somewhere? How do you get all these interfaces out onto custom PCBs? And it just adds a lot of complexity. When they announced the Raspberry Pi 3 recently, here's mine by the way, in this funky little case with a heatsink, first Raspberry Pi I've ever had to put a heatsink on. By the way, the official advice regarding the heatsink on the Raspberry Pi 3 is that you probably shouldn't need one unless you're going to be doing a lot of intensive applications. Personally, I can't stand to have a processor up sitting around at 70 or 80 degrees. It is not going to harm the Raspberry Pi SoC because they are tested at well over 100 degrees. It is not going to cause any damage, but I can't. Coming from a PC background, I cannot stand to see temperatures up at 70, 80 degrees or higher. I had to get a heatsink on there just for my own peace of mind. Anyway, when they announced this thing, what they also announced at the same time was that there's going to be an updated version of the compute module. And if you haven't seen the compute module, don't know what that is, I will pull up a picture on screen. Basically, it is in the form of, it's a Raspberry Pi, but it's in the form of an SO-DIMM laptop style memory stick, memory DIMM. That, yeah, that's the right word for it. Anyway, but what that means is that all of the connectors, all of the pins, all of the connections, all of the stuff that comes out of the Raspberry Pi SoC, so you've got your HDMI video, your power connections, the GPIO, the USB, well, there is no USB built in, there's only the one USB you get from the SoC, but everything comes out onto the edge connector, onto the edge pins. And if I'm going to be designing my own PCBs, that makes it 100 times easier. Especially when, at the moment, you can get the Raspberry Pi compute module development kit for about 36 quid from Farnell. Originally it was up at 80 quid. It's a complete kit including the breakout board, which breaks out all of the I/O and all of the GPIO. It includes a compute module itself. It also includes a couple of other additional boards to convert the camera connector, and it also includes a power supply for that. And that is a fantastic price, because that is not much more than the Raspberry Pi, well, the basic Raspberry Pi costs. Now, the idea behind the compute module is that it is supposed to be a standardized form factor. So you design your board, you design it around this compute module, and the idea is that if a new one comes out, you pop your compute module out and put the new one in. Hopefully, there's been nothing mentioned about this, but hopefully that is how it's going to work with the compute module version 3. There is no compute module version 2, they kind of skipped that. Go over to the Raspberry Pi website, and there's a couple of articles, a couple of interviews linked where Eben talks about why there is no compute module 2, but anyway, hopefully that is how the compute module 3 is going to work. So if I design now around the compute module 1, although it's far slower, it shouldn't necessarily still be a problem for the games that I'm going to be looking at, because they work fairly well on an original Raspberry Pi anyway because of the GPU assist. But when the compute module 3 is released, I should just be able to drop that in. So hopefully I'm actually going to be able to start making some progress on this soon. It's going to take a couple of weeks for me to get my bench set up properly, but hopefully I can start making some real work on this stuff soon. As soon as I actually get the Wii U gamepad shell through, I'll take a quick look at that. I'll break the camera and take a quick look at that. So what I'm probably going to do with these videos then is I'm probably going to split this off into two then, and start doing two separate series about this, hopefully. And hopefully I'll actually be able to get something done soon. So anyway, that's probably enough of me talking for now. I have no idea how long I've been waffling on for. There's no timer on this camera. There's no timer on my camcorder. I can't see how long I've been recording. Balls. Anyway, well, thank you for watching, and like, subscribe, thumbs up, share, all that good YouTube shit, and hopefully I'll catch you again soon.